Jesus Christ, Boom are fucking killing it with Power Rangers, they really are. Where every time I review a piece of Disney Star Wars media, it feels like a social justice warrior trying to fist me into compliance, every time I read a Boom Power Rangers story, the nostalgia trip is great. Go-Go Power Rangers Volume 2 contains issues 5 to 8 of the prequel series that runs alongside the main Mighty Morphin comics, and I was so impressed with Go-Go Volume 1 that I started on this straight away. In my last Power Rangers review, which was Go-Go Volume 1, I bitched about how Amazon fucked up my order for The Psychopath, and as of right now, I still don't have it, and I won't be getting it till January, and in my review of the Year 2 Deluxe Edition, I bitched about how Amazon failed to deliver that even though I pre-ordered it, so I had to source that somewhere else as well. And the day I'm writing this review, the Shattered Grid hardcover arrived. So given all that, would it shock you to know that the Shattered Grid hardcover has been released, and even though I pre-ordered my copy from Amazon in February, they're still saying their release date is after Christmas? Amazon, absolute fucking jokers, man. So with Shattered Grid arriving sooner than expected from a company that isn't Amazon, and the fact that Go-Go Volume 2 leads straight into Shattered Grid, I had to get this review done ASAP so I could dive right into Shattered Grid. So Volume 2 continues exactly where Volume 1 left off, and it has the exact same creative team, and it's every bit as good as Volume 1. It's still the flip side of the Mighty Morphin comics, continuing to have the lighter tone, and while it still has a good story, it's less grand, with the focus shifting to be about the actual Rangers and their day-to-day lives, the dynamic they have as a new team, and the tone of the book is much lighter and more humorous. So I did want to mention this, and it's right at the beginning of the book, but it's irrelevant to the rest of the story, but I wanted to mention it because it's important. At the beginning, we see the Rangers have all got jobs at Ernie's Juice Bar as part of their cover, and I thought that was a good inclusion because it gives them a reason to keep hanging around there, just like they did in the show, and it's not just because it's the 90s and going to the gym and keeping fit and extreme sports, it's cool. It's a legit reason to keep something from the original series and include it regularly. So that's great, but that's small potatoes compared to the rest of the book, but I did want to note it because that's a thumbs up from me. So the biggest thing about the continuation of the story in this book is Matthew. I thought Parrot did really well with the real Matthew imprisoned by Rita on the moon, and a putty disguised as Matthew trying to learn the Rangers' secrets and unbalance their lives. For instance, in the first volume, there was very clearly the potential for the start of a relationship between Jason and Trini, and with prom coming up and them being teenagers, the fake Matthew gets in Jason's head about whether he should ask Trini to the prom or not. This in turn leaves him getting stressed out more than normal and distancing himself from Trini as well as the rest of the team, and this is shown very, very well when he snaps at the rest of the Rangers during a training session where none of them seem to really be able to connect with their individual Zords, and he basically says that if he needs them to dislike him, if it saves the world, he's fine with it. I thought this was excellent because apart from playing into the story later on, it also shows how the fake Matt is subtly destabilising the group. The fake Matt isn't perfectly integrated as a human though, and Kimberly says how he walks funny and fake Matt brushes it off, and it's possible some people may have missed this or thought it's because he's been in the hospital, but actually it's a really very clever inclusion by Parrots because it's not Matt, it's Rita's putty disguised as Matt. So he would normally walk like a putty, and he's getting used to walking as a human as part of his disguise. I think that's very clever, and there are lots of subtle things like that in these books that all add up to a well done story. Later on with fake Matt, he's at the cinema with Matt's family because they don't know he's a fake Matt, and Rita sends a group of putties to attack, and fake Matt stops the attack by talking to the putties, which Zach kind of catches onto but not quite because he kind of only caught it for a second and it wasn't clear to him exactly what was going on, but he knew something was going on. It was enough to plant a seed of doubt in his mind. And again, this is good writing because unlike Disney Star Wars where shit can happen because the story demands it with no consideration for whether it matches with anything else or makes sense, Parrot has laid down these threads, and Zach seeing a glimpse of fake Matt talking to the putties for a split second is one of these threads, just like fake Matt manipulating Jason is one, or Kimberly spotting his weird walk is one. All these threads come together at the end, and I love that he's put some time into laying the groundwork for a good finale, so thumbs up for Parrot, well done. Billy also has an interesting arc with Promethea, and we see that they send him a lot of gifts to try and persuade him to come and work for them, presumably as an intern, and I thought this was a fantastic inclusion because not only does Billy have his own arc in the book, which ends with him choosing not to go to Promethea and throwing away his gifts, at which point his dad rather humorously asks him why he had to throw them away when they could have sold them and bought a samurai sword or something. By the way, Billy's dad looks exactly how David Yost looks today, and I'm not sure if that was a deliberate reference or if it was just Parrot being smart or if it's just a total coincidence, but it's something I noticed. But anyway, I liked the Promethea arc with Billy because it ties right into what we saw in year 2, and as we once saw in the show, he feels like he's the weakest member of the team because he's the weakest fighter. And when during the fight Zack glimpsed fake Matt talking to the putties, Billy is actually in the middle of an interview with Promethea, and when he does eventually teleport in to help the rest of the Rangers, he gets held hostage by Goldar, and when the team demands answers about where he was, he shares with them his self-doubts and says that maybe he should give his powers to Matt, which not only echoes the ending of his time as a Ranger at the beginning of Zeo, but it's also really tense because as I was reading it I was thinking, oh shit, they're going to give his powers to one of Rita's monsters, don't do it Rangers! This is another thread that's resolved by the end of the book, and I love how Parrot has all these things going on, but most of them do actually get resolved by the end of the book. Nothing is wasted here, and if there's a story element to it, it serves a purpose in the grand story, and to me, that's good writing. Well, except maybe for Bulk and Skull. I mean, it's Bulk and Skull. You can't really give them an epically important story without ruining the characters. So they do have their own arc because you can't not include Bulk and Skull in Mighty Morphin or Go-Go Power Rangers. And their arc is Bulk running for Prom King, acting like Trump, walking around campaigning and saying things like, making Juggernaut great again, all the while Skull is supporting him like his running man or running mate, whatever they call it. It's funny stuff, but doesn't outstay its welcome, and I thought it was interesting to see that Bulk actually gets bullied by the hot chick who wants to be prom queen, but not with Bulk as her prom king. And this was interesting because in the show, Bulk was the big bad bully, and now he's getting a taste of his own medicine. He even ends up bowing out of the race, even though I suspect he would have won, but we'll never know. Zack also had a very minor arc where a girl called Violet sends him a coded message to ask him to the prom, but it didn't really amount to anything interesting, and it was Billy that decoded the message anyway, so if they do bring her character back, I'd like to see it move more towards Billy and Violet, since they both share the same kind of intelligence, and there you go, I've just officially become a shipper. Shoot me now. And the prom itself is what the entire book revolves around and ends with, and there's a very well done dynamic between all the people involved that really did make it feel like a teenage dance. Some people like Zack were cool as a cucumber, then others like Jason were freaking out. Hell, Bulk's on the verge of winning Prom King, but his nerves get the better of him and he bows out. But before that, it was nice to see both Bulk and Skull acting, dare I say it, gentlemanly? They double dated, and for once they weren't arseholes, and the girls seemed to notice, and it was a good colour on those two. It reminded me of when Lieutenant Stone joined the series and Bulk and Skull started to pull their socks up. In fact, the reason Bulk bowed out is because the bitchy prom queen threatened to hurt Bulk's date. How nice is Bulk? But then his date is a total feminazi towards him, and instead of seeing that he was trying to be nice and protect her, tells him to lose her number because she's not afraid of a scrap. And since her best friend is Skull's date, he gets the same treatment too. Poor Bulk and Skull. The one time they do something nice, they get shit on by a feminazi. I don't think this is a social justice warrior thing though. Their dates were punks like Bulk and Skull are, and while Bulk was being chivalrous, maybe he shouldn't have underestimated his date. Oh, and we also see Principal Kaplan with his blatantly obvious wig. But as I said, the prom is where the story reaches its conclusion, and after thinking it over and sharing his doubts about Matt with some of the other Rangers, but definitely not Kimberly, he tries to catch fake Matt out by making up a story about when they were kids, and Zack's suspicions are confirmed when Matt goes along with the completely made up story. And I thought that was a very clever bit of writing. It could have very easily have just devolved into a fight for no reason other than fake Matt's powers start failing, which does actually happen later on, but instead of just having that as the reason for his true nature being revealed to the Rangers, Ryan Parrott has added in a smart storyline aspect too, and I appreciate that. The real Matt escapes Rita's prison by picking the lock with a fork, then holding Squat hostage, and during the prom he runs in all dishevelled and says he's been kidnapped and held on the moon by Rita. And that's when the penny drops. The Rangers realise the Matt they've been hanging out with was a fake. Fake Matt loses control and his powers start flipping out, and he can't seem to control who he morphs into. If you remember at the end of Terminator 2 when the T-1000 was severely damaged, it kept morphing into all the people it had imitated before. Well, that's what happens here. As the Rangers fight him, he seems to become fully sentient, at one point even stating "I'm awake," and he disobeys Rita when she gives him commands, and this leaves Rita no choice but to take him over by mind control. And something I've noticed with Rita, I love that they use purple on her. Sometimes she has purple eyes, sometimes when she possesses things it's purple, or sometimes when she uses her wand it's purple. And I'm not sure how popular this idea is, but purple is the colour of magic, and I didn't know that till I was a teenager. You know, like blue's depression, red's anger, green is jealousy. Purple is magic. That's why in Smallville season 4, when you've got that Margaret Isabel Thoreau story arc, when she casts spells in the past, her eyes go purple. When Lana in the present is possessed by her and she's casting spells, her eyes go purple. It's because purple is the colour of magic. If you didn't know that, you'll notice it in a lot more things now. Anyway, the putty grows, the Rangers call the Megazord, and Rita morphs the putty, who she's controlling like an avatar, into a copy of the Megazord. So it's literally a Rita Megazord versus the actual Megazord, which I thought was fucking awesome. And when it looks like the Power Rangers are losing, it's Billy that remembers a lesson from the beginning of the book, which is that sometimes the individual Zords can do what the Megazord can't. So he tells them to disengage Megazord mode, and through a combination of each Zord's abilities, like the Triceratops Zord's horn chains, the Mastodon Zord's ice breath, and the Saber-toothed Tiger Zord's teeth, they hold the Rita Megazord down, while Kimberly comes in for the final blow with the Pterodactyl Zord's lasers, but not before threatening Rita's life if she ever messes with someone she loves again. With the putty Rita Megazord thing destroyed, we see Rita standing alone in her palace, bested by the Rangers, and I thought the whole thing was really well done. And the whole team thanks Billy, and they say to him, without him thinking of using the individual Zords rather than the Megazords, they wouldn't have won. And this is the end of Billy's arc in the book, because he's now convinced he has a role to play. He may not be the best fighter, but he's smart, and that's just how it happened in the show. Of course, the final part of the story is Matt and the effects of what's happened to him, because he seems to be suffering from both PTSD and amnesia, and he's just an absolute mess. He won't leave the house, he won't talk, he won't do anything. He's clearly tortured by what happened to him, so I can't wait to see what they do with him in Shattered Grid. And that's the end of the main story in the book, and in case you haven't realised by now, I thought Parrott did an excellent job, both continuing the story from the previous book while also writing new aspects and tying everything together to reach one conclusion. I mean, that's crazy! 6 separate pieces of story or something like that, and they all shared the same resolution point, the prom. No wonder it says "Go Go to Homecoming" on the back, it's the most important fucking part of the story. As well as the main story, at the beginning of each issue are a few pages that show how Rita came to have Goldar, Babu and Squat as her underlings, and I particularly like this because in Lost Chronicles Volume 1 there was a story about how Finster came to work with Rita, which I believe was also touched on in Year 2, and also in Lost Chronicles there was a story about Goldar, his brother, and Lord Zed, and we see that referenced here, with Rita offering Goldar revenge against Lord Zed for killing his brother if he served her loyally. So it's nice that they've brought those side stories into the main fold. Lost Chronicles is there for anyone who wants to see an expansion of what's in the main Go-Go and Mighty Morphin comics, but it's not essential, so including references to them here was good, because people who read Lost Chronicles will get a kick out of knowing exactly how it ties in with this, but also anyone who hasn't read it isn't missing anything important, so I think it's a great balance and everybody's happy. The very last thing at the end of issue 8 is a tease for Shattered Grid, where we see the Ranger Slayer with a sliver of the green Chaos Crystal being handed to her by Finster 5, and she says she's going to bring Draken back to them. This won't make sense to anyone who hasn't read Shattered Grid, like I hadn't when I read it, so it left me thinking this looks awesome. I'm reading Shattered Grid now though, and I'm thinking that crystal looks smaller. They even say it's all that's left of the crystal, and they say about bringing Draken back, so I'm wondering if the Ranger Slayer comes from a future after Shattered Grid where Draken is defeated and she's gone back in time to change the result of that crossover. I don't read the comics, I try to avoid spoilers. I mean, the fucking White Ranger was unavoidable, thanks for that, Boom. And getting the Mighty Morphin hardcovers is a yearly event that that I look forward to, and when I get these books, it's the first I read of it as much as possible, so I really honestly do not know, but I'm looking forward to finding out. It's just a short tease for Shattered Grid, it's less than 2 pages long, but it works very well. The back of the book has a few cover pages, but just like Volume 1, not all of them, although I do believe they are collected in the Shattered Grid hardcover, which I have mixed feelings about, by the way. So at least they're in oversized format somewhere. And I like how the book matches up absolutely perfectly with Volume 1. I love when a series of book matches up like this, just like how the Mighty Morphin hardcovers match up. I hope Boom keep it this way. I love it, and I think they look fantastic on my shelf. I'll say it again though, we still need a hardcover for these 2 volumes, because if the rest of Go-Go is going to be in the Mighty Morphin deluxe hardcovers, then we should have one called Year Zero. They can make it yellow and it can have issues 1 to 8 plus anything relevant, like any of the stories from Lost Chronicles that matched up with this story, like the Goldar one, the Finster one, and that would fill out the book nicely. So overall, I loved Volume 2. It continues everything that was excellent about Volume 1, while also adding an extra dimension of depth with the Rita, Babu, Squat and Goldar storyline. Just like Volume 1, it's only 4 issues long, but it didn't need to be anything more. Go-Go is one of those comics where when I finish reading a volume, I'm always left wanting more, but not in a bad way. It makes me feel like a kid again, and when I finish reading, I'm like, that was awesome, I cannot wait for the next book. Go-Go has this wonderful sense of momentum that helps the reader just fly through the pages, while just like in the last book, Ryan Parrott delivers an interesting and fast-paced story while also exploring the characters, both the good guys and the bad, and there are quite a few little details that show Ryan Parrott either loved the series during its heyday or he's bothered to do all the research. Either way, his writing is on point, with lots of references and throwbacks that show one way or another he cared enough to do this properly, and as a fan I really appreciate that, so seriously, well done Ryan Parrott, and once again, Dan Mora and Raul Angulo's artwork fit the comic perfectly to help create one of the best Rangers series ever. Go-Go Volume 2 is every bit as good as the first volume, and that's really saying something.